Thank you, Josh. and as Josh said, thank you all for attending today's discussion, which is really one of the keynote programs that complement Koffler Art's current exhibition, which is called The Synagogue at Babyn Yar, Turning the Nightmare of Evil into a Shared Dream of Good. The exhibition focuses on the remarkable genesis of Manuel Herz's even more remarkable pop-out synagogue that was built in 2021 to mark the 80th anniversary of the massacres at Babyn Yar on the edge of the ravine of the Babyn Yar site, which in 1941 was the site of one of the most, if not the worst, 24-hour mass killing by bullets during the entire Second World War, and during which 33,771 Jews were shot and killed. The resonances with what has happened over the past 10 days in Israel and Gaza are so dense they are unspeakable. There are no words. Today's encounter is between Dr. Robert Jan van Pelt, the exhibition curator, photographer Edward Bertinsky, whose collaborative photos, and I'll let Edward explain exactly what that means, create the very palpable contours of the exhibition space and allow us as spectators to feel that we are in the snow-swept and somewhat bleak woods of the Babyn Yar ravine. And thirdly, Edward's co-conspirator, Maxim Dondik, who is joining us on Zoom from Kyiv. So thank you truly, all three of you, for joining us for today's event. Today's event would not have been possible, of course, without the support of the ROM, Josh Bassages and his team here, Jacqueline Kwak-Jansen and Erin Kerr and others. Thank you. Truly, it's particularly meaningful for us to be able to have this collaboration and to co-host this event with you here today. And in that light, I'd also like to thank my predecessor, Anthony Sargent, who served as the Koffler's interim director for the year leading up to my arriving here 10 days ago, and who initiated this connection. Alongside the remarkable collaboration between Edward and Maxim, photographs play a particularly important role in this exhibition. Remarkably and undoubtedly against the orders of his regiment, the Wehrmacht photographer Johannes Hele left in the possession of his widow a unique collection of some 29 color slide images from Babyn Yar that were taken on the 29th and 30th of September 1941, and again in early October, documenting the moments just before the massacre, the moments just after the massacre, as well as some shots that document the cover-up attempts that were made in those early days of October. 8 of these photographs are on show in the exhibition and serve as a chilling entry into our understanding of this event, and I'd say a chilling entry into the exhibition itself. The work of Dutch photographer Ivan Ban also figures prominently. I'm sure that will be talked about in the upcoming talk. The Synagogue at Babyn Yar exhibition opened on Monday, April the 17th, Yom HaShoah, the Holocaust Remembrance Day, and will close in less than 1 month on Sunday, November the 12th, soon after Holocaust Education Week, and I implore you, do not miss it. It's at 180 Shaw Street from Wednesday through Sundays from 12 to 5, and it's an exceptional exhibition which from here will travel around the world. We have museums on 5 continents that have been so moved by this exhibition that they want to show it in their own cities. Now I'm very pleased to introduce to you today's moderator, Josh Heuman, who is the Koffler Gallery's Head of Public Engagement. And Josh, over to you and our guests. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you, Josh, and thank you, Matthew, for that wonderful introduction, and thank you everyone for joining us here today. I think this conversation has been a long time in coming. Logistics are always challenging to work out, and so it's of course delightful to sit down with both Dr. Robert Jan van Pelt and Ed Burtynsky, and to have Maxim somewhere in cyberspace right now. There he is. Hello, Maxim. So we can see you.
Hello, everybody.
So, and I think Maxim, I'm not sure, Maxim, are you in Kyiv? Are you in Lviv? Where in Ukraine are you right now?
I'm just in Lviv here, because I'm just based in Lviv here, when I'm just not in front line.
Okay. Thank you so much. So, to introduce our three speakers, I'll start with Robert Jan van Pelt, recipient of many distinguished academic honors. He has taught at the University of Waterloo School of Architecture since 1987 and held appointments at many higher education institutions in Europe, in Asia, and in North America. He has published books on such diverse topics as The Cosmic Speculations on the Temple of Solomon, Relativism in Architectural History, The History of Auschwitz, The History of the Holocaust, Jewish Refugees and Holocaust Denial, and most recently, an Atlas of Jewish Space, which accompanied the opening in 2021 of the synagogue constructed at Babyn Yar. An internationally recognized authority on the history of Auschwitz, Van Pelt's work was featured in 2 BBC television programs, and he chaired the team developing a master plan for the preservation of Auschwitz. He also appeared in Errol Morris's film, Mr. Death, The Rise and Fall of Fred A. Lochter Jr., and served as an expert witness on the Holocaust and Holocaust denial in the notorious libel case David Irving versus Penguin and Lipstadt. Before the exhibition at the Koffler, Van Pelt's forensic work on the Auschwitz crematoria generated the Evidence Room installation, which was shown at the Venice Biennale, here at ROM, and many other museums. And he is also the chief curator of the traveling exhibition Auschwitz, Not Far Away, Not Long Ago, which has been shown to date in Madrid, New York, Kansas City, Malmo in Sweden, and Los Angeles. Now, Ed Burtynsky is widely regarded as one of the world's most eloquent contemporary photographers. His unforgettable images of global industrial landscapes represent over 40 years of dedication to bearing witness to the impact of humans on the planet, with photographs included in the collections of over 80 major museums around the world. Major touring exhibitions include Anthropocene 2018, which is shown here in Toronto, Water 2013, Oil in 2009 at the Corcoran Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C., China, which opened in 2005 for a 5-year tour, and Manufactured Landscapes in 2003 at the National Gallery of Canada. His work was central to the award-winning documentary trilogy, Jennifer Bechwald's Manufactured Landscapes in 2006, Watermark in 2013, and Anthropocene, The Human Epoch in 2018, which he co-directed, the last 2. His many distinctions include the inaugural TED Prize in 2005, shared with Bono and Robert Fischel, the Governor General's Award in Visual and Media Arts, the Photo London Master of Photography Award in 2018, a Royal Photographic Society Honorary Fellowship in 2020, and more recently, Outstanding Contribution to Photography Award from the World Photography Organization, the Pollution Probe Award in 2022, and he was inducted into the International Photography Hall of Fame, as well as holding 8 honorary doctorates. And Maxim Dondiuk is a Ukrainian visual artist working in the field of documentary photography. His practice integrates multiple media, including photography, video, text, and archival materials. His work often explores issues relating to history, memory, conflict, and their consequences. Select past projects include TB epidemic in Ukraine, Crimea Sich, Between Life and Death, Culture of Confrontation, which has a corresponding photo book from 2019, and 2 ongoing projects include Untitled Project from Chernobyl and documentation of the current conflict in Ukraine since Russia's full-scale invasion in late February of 2022. Maxim has been awarded numerous recognitions, including International Photographer of the Year in the Lucy Awards, a finalist of the Prix Pictet Photography Prize, a finalist in the W. Eugene Smith Grant in Humanistic Photography, and an artist residency with Cité Internationale des Arts in Paris. And his work has been exhibited internationally at the Musée d'Art Moderne in Paris, Somerset House in London, International Red Cross and Red Crescent Museum in Geneva, and the Biennale of Photography in Bogota in Colombia. So thank you to all 3. Those bios are so filled with so much esteem and so much hard work behind it. So we really appreciate your time and your knowledge and your expertise. So launching into some questions for now, and then we'll take a few questions from the audience near the end before moving into a little reception afterward. I wonder, Robert Jan, if I could start, if you could tell us about your connection with Manuel Herz and, of course, the synagogue that was eventually constructed at Babyn Yar.
Yes. Manuel and I met around 20 years ago in London. We both are connected to a kind of group called Forensic Architecture. It's a group that is located at Goldsmiths College. It was conceived and run by Eyal Weizmann, an Israeli architect. And this group has been involved with the relationship of architecture, architectural discipline, architectural methods, and human rights violations. Eyal has been working a lot with Palestinian groups to look at settlements on the West Bank, or the question if Bedouins were in the Negev or not in the 20s or 30s. Certain issues of rights go back to that. And through my work on Auschwitz, I was a little bit like the granddaddy of this forensic architecture, because I had done forensic work on the architectural plans of Auschwitz in the 1990s. And Manuel was also involved with this. He's very interested in Jewish space, and his thesis project at the Architectural Association in the 1990s was basically studying Jewish space, especially the space of the Talmud. So basically it is textual space and the way it translates back into architectural space, and that then relates back to issues like the eruv, the symbolic boundary, extending the size of the home during Shabbat, which we also have here in Toronto. And so in 2020, just as the lockdown started, I was invited to join the architectural board, the new architectural board of the Babyn Yar Foundation in Kyiv. The Babyn Yar Foundation was created in 2016 to basically take stewardship over the 160 plus hectares of the Babyn Yar site. Babyn Yar site, which is very much like any of the ravines we have in Toronto. The topography of Kyiv is quite comparable to that of Toronto, except the water doesn't drain in a lake, but in the Dnieper River. And one of the side ravines, now think about the somewhat larger Rosedale Valley ravine, is the Babyn Yar ravine, and that became in 1941 the execution site for almost 34,000 Jews in September 1941. And after that, it continued to be an execution site for other groups, Orthodox Ukrainians, Ukrainian resistance fighters, and so on and so on. Because of the Soviet policy of basically denying the Holocaust as a particular tragedy of the Jewish people, they would be talking about the suffering of citizens of the USSR in the Great Patriotic War, but always had denied the particular Jewish dimension of the majority of the civilians slaughtered by the Germans. The site itself was actually not developed as a memorial landscape in the 1940s or 50s. In the 1960s, it actually collapsed. A dam was created in the site as part of an industrialization process. There was a big mud lake was created behind the dam to produce bricks. There was an automatic brick factory that used the kind of mud of the site itself in order to have a fast production of bricks to build the new neighborhoods around the site. The dam collapsed and another 1,500 people died down of the dam. It was only in the 1970s when Ukrainian citizens of Kiev themselves started also to agitate against the Russian or the Soviet rule that in some way the memory of Babyn Yar and the massacre was revived, and the first monument was created in 1976, still a kind of Soviet heroic monument, but only after 1990, the independence of Ukraine, did the site really become a center of commemoration, not only of Jews, but also of the other victim groups. So by 2010, there were some 30 monuments in the ravine, basically. So you have a monument to Jews, to Roma and Sinti people, but even also to Ukrainian freedom fighters with a large cross, and so on. So it became a kind of a free-for-all of commemoration. And when in 2016, the Ukraine was looking already to join the EU, the way you deal with Holocaust memory is an important kind of political issue for admission. This January 27th is the only common EU day of commemoration. Basically, the Ukrainian government decided something had to be done. Some kind of policy had to be created. A foundation was created. Nathan Sharansky, famous refusenik, became the chair. They got funding. And basically in 2020, the decision was taken that we need to now make an act. We need to create something. An architectural board was created of 7 people, and I was one of the members. And I started with a seminar on Jewish space, basically to basically educate ourselves. How are we going to think about this space? Very much in the spirit of Manuel Hertz's original thesis project. And I quoted it. And in one meeting, basically, we came to the conclusion that we might begin not with a big memorial, but a memorial to survival, to living, a synagogue. And so now most of us knew Manuel, and basically his name came up, and we said, yeah, he's the only guy who can do this. So we called Manuel. We first secured some funding, a kind of unlimited amount of funding, and we called Manuel. And within a week, he came back with a proposal. So, this was the proposal, a Siddur. As I told you, Manuel was interested in the space of the Talmud. Yeah? I mean, if you open the Talmud, the page has a very interesting spatial composition. But in this case, it was about the Siddur, because the Siddur is basically why Jews still exist. Siddur is a symbol of persistence. Every day we go to the synagogue and we pray. Now, maybe not me, but many of you will do. And so the discipline of Siddur, the opening and closing of the Siddur, became for us basically the central idea of this synagogue. A building that will be opened at the beginning of the day, will be closed at the end of the day, and that while it is open, is in fact available to anyone. One of the big problems in synagogue architecture anywhere today, more than maybe a week ago, even in North America, is that normally when you go to a synagogue, there are police cars around the synagogue to protect it for good reasons. The synagogue in Kiev is protected by security forces. But we wanted to create something that would be open, that basically doesn't hide that people who are not Jewish do not feel this kind of sense that they are kind of unwelcome. And so the idea was to create in this ravine, at the edge of the place where the killings had taken place, this open book, quite literally, that also would allow other people to understand what Judaism is about.
Thank you so much. I think that really helps us with a solid foundation of how the synagogue came about, and so obviously inviting all of our audience and beyond to come to the Koffler to see this exhibition that really explores the variety of influences in addition to the Siddur. So I wonder, of course, how then did this exhibition come into being?
So I teach at the University of Waterloo, and Manuel Hertz was last year in North America. And so basically, he said if you pay the ticket from where he was actually in Quebec City to Toronto, then I will give a free lecture at Waterloo. So I couldn't resist the temptation. He came in the end of November to Waterloo, gave a talk about the synagogue, and it was a conversation between the two of us, and a new maternity hospital that he had done in Senegal, which is an amazing project. And on the way back, we had dinner at Partisan Architect, which is an amazing firm here. My former students started it. Alex Josephson, one of the founders, had basically organized a dinner party, and Manuel was explaining what he was doing. And one of the guests, Carol Weinbaum, who is a well-known patron of the arts, basically said, maybe this is something for Toronto. And she approached the Koffler, Anthony Sargent, and Anthony and Carol and I and the board of the Koffler started to talk. And basically, we got a kind of proposal: if you can have something up by Yom HaShoah, this is 3 months later, then we have a room for you for 6 months. And so Manuel and I and Douglas Birkinshaw, a Toronto architect who became really the project manager and the third curator, started to develop a number of concepts. And it became very quickly clear that the only way that the spirit of the project could be really represented in a 140 square meter gallery was if in some way the site was going to be the precondition of whatever we would show. And so how do you represent a site that is on the other side of the world? And so it was actually Anthony Sargent. So we were thinking about Ivan Ban, because we had a great set of photos by Ivan Ban, which had been taken in the summer of 2021 after the synagogue had been completed. And then Anthony said, but we can do even something better. We can ask Ed Bertinsky. And that's how Ed came in.
Okay, so the plot thickens. So Ed, I wonder, so how were you approached to take these pictures? And perhaps you could tell us, I believe that you were sort of potentially slated to go to take these pictures, but something got in the way, and that gave birth to this collaboration. So perhaps you could elaborate for us.
Yeah, so Anthony did call and said, would you be interested in doing this? And at first I was, I've been trying to get to Ukraine, and I wanted to go there in 2020, and then COVID came along, and then 2021 I was going to go, and COVID was still there, and then 22 the war began, so I didn't get there. And I also was the photographer chosen to work with Daniel Liebskin on the memorial, the National Memorial in Ottawa, a Holocaust Memorial, and had done a major loop around 5 countries, and saw Auschwitz in a lot of these sites, and worked with PhDs to understand what happened at these sites. And it was really almost like forensic, going to the scene of the crime 75 years later, and how do you represent that, and how do you begin to tell that story? So when Anthony called me, I thought, okay, well, maybe I can go, because I didn't get there. It was just, we couldn't fit it into that for the Holocaust Memorial. We couldn't fit that trip in. So I thought maybe I can go, and then again, travel didn't permit that I can go at that time. And so I was thinking, how do I do this? And at the beginning of the war in Ukraine, my wife Julie and I decided to do a fundraiser, and we raised We did a special print edition, and we're able to raise overnight, literally, a large sum of money that was matched by Red Cross. And then, and I think in one day we ended up moving about $750,000 towards the war effort and towards refugees and what was happening in Ukraine. And then I wanted to do something more. And so I looked around and I looked at different photographers that were doing work, and I thought I could start to collaborate with someone, and that eventually I would go to Ukraine and begin to work with them. So I looked around, and actually Maxim and I were in the same space, although we didn't connect when it was a pre-Pictet nominate. We were both nominated one year, I think it's 2015. And so I looked around and I saw Maxim, and I called him up and I said, I really like what you're doing. At some point I'd love to work with you, maybe go to Ukraine and collaborate and have your images and maybe my images and do a book with Steidl. So we were already in that space, and we were already having this discussion. So when Anthony called and I realized I couldn't go, it was funny. I asked Maxim, what kind of camera are you working with? And he happened to be working with a camera that I had just purchased myself and was really impressed with. And I said, okay, great. We're on the same page. I have the exact lens. I have the exact camera. We can work together and kind of connect. And you bring what you bring to the table, and I'll try and bring my ideas to the table as well. And somehow, again, in the scene of the crime, that we enveloped the whole exhibition in a way. And I think what was important when I wanted to work with Maxim on this was that we wanted the trees to be present. We wanted that forest to feel real. And so there was a lot of work with Anthony and yourself on getting the right lighting and on making sure the prints were, and I had just acquired the printer that could do the vinyls, and I had full control over the printing. So it really was the first actual print job with that new printer that I was really excited about, because if those of you have seen it, there's a real beautiful presence to it, and it was it's such a wonderful thing to be working with Maxim as well on that.
That's really so remarkable, because so you were already sort of like of the mindset of working on Holocaust memorial related photography, and as you point out, these photographs, they're presented from floor to ceiling on really wide vinyl panels, essentially applied to the wall, completely seamless, and within just a few inches you cannot see any pixelation at all. They're really remarkable from a photography, like, technical standpoint. So I'll call on Maxim at this stage and ask, so Maxim, what were your thoughts when Ed reached out to you about this possibility, this collaboration?
Edward just called to me, and I was in Kharkiv, just take some picture near front line, and I was excited because I know Edward worked before. Edward supported me in the beginning of war, and for me it was really nice because it was like challenge. I just a little bit know about this technique, how to do like big panorama, but it was like really interesting for me, and I just say agree, and I just go to Babyn Yar and we start working, and I work with teams of Edward, with Jim, who really support me with some technical, because it was really hard sometimes to do something. Yeah, we do just a lot of research, scouting, make a lot of call with Edward, with Jim, and just looking for just a better place, and try to just show you and all people who just can see this exhibition, this place, and especially even during war, because unfortunately Babyn Yar in 2022 was like bombing from airstrike, and just a lot of people also death in this place, and it's like some really hard place. And for me, it was quite interesting, especially I just before spent a lot of time in Neo Frontline, and now I come back to some historical, tragedical place, and I just spent more than a week just looking for, feeling this, and try to do this picture. So unfortunately, I just cannot see it's real, but I just saw it's like picture, and it looks like really, really nice. And I just hope people who can see it, who see this synagogue and this wall and this huge picture, can feel a little bit this place. It's sad place, but it's like memorial place in Kyiv.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Maxim. So before we take a closer look at the images in the exhibition and how they function, I'll ask Ed and Maxim in turn to sort of speak a little bit more about their individual practice, and hopefully we'll see how the arc of those two lead to this moment of the photographs that end up in this exhibition. Oh, there we go. So starting with Ed, maybe you'll speak about these images, and I'll flip through them as we go.
Sure. So this image I shot in 1981, and I bring it forward in that I was kind of grappling with where I wanted to go with my work, and at that time when I was choosing where to go, I wanted to work with large format. I wanted that high resolution, high detail, and that's always been part of my work. And then I went to an 8x10 camera. But on this trip, it was kind of, I had taken about a year hiatus. I wasn't shooting. I was thinking about other things where I wanted to go. And I decided that I wanted to go back to the landscape. And even to actually, some of my teachers were saying, "Don't go there. It's a theme that's been overdone. You can't really. You'd have a hard time contributing to it. Use your talents elsewhere." Whatever. And at that time, street photography was the big thing, and black and white. And that just wasn't me. This was really where I felt, and I felt that there was still a language that I could start to develop around the idea of what a landscape can tell us. And in this case, it was just, I was driving along and I see these new green shoots coming out of this matted landscape from the winter before, and this rebirth and the kind of the death of the year before. And so there is this death and rebirth in this image, and it really led me to believe in, with that image, it was this interest in the idea that we have become as a species so disconnected from nature that nature for me was a really important aspect, and that humans were in a very dangerous place by saying nature is out there outside of us, that we aren't part of it, and nature is very much the cupboard that we go to get all the stuff we need to build the world that we built. And looking at technology and how technology is allowing, and the mechanical advantage of the internal combustion engine, that our human expansion comes at the price of nature. So to me, I thought that this was a big enough idea that I could spend the rest of my life working on it. That somehow I'm going to look at this landscape and try to have every image that I'm taking somehow speak to our relationship to the natural world and what's happening to the natural world. So it is almost lament for the loss of nature and biodiversity to our success. So then if you look, I then went and said, okay, I'm going to look at large-scale human interventions. So this is one of the largest mines in the world, the Kennecott Copper Mine, just outside of Salt Lake City. When I read the brochure, there's a little platform you can go in. This is actually shot from the visitors platform. And the brochure said if you took a car at the top, it was like 3 miles across the top and a mile deep. And he said, if you took a car and just drove on those ledges, you'd have to drive 550 miles to get to the bottom, just to start giving you a sense of scale. And then what I started to understand is, in the Romantic period, the sublime was really nature. And you think of Turner's and the ship lost at sea, gale force winds, and we are diminished by the power of nature. And nature is the omnipresent force that we are in awe of, and it also strikes fear. And we're seeing a lot of fear of nature these days with flooding and fires and all that. But again, that was a notion, the Kantian notion of the sublime. And then I kept thinking, well, we're now into a human sublime, that we are now creating theaters that we're diminished in, of scale. And we can only work at this scale because of the internal combustion engine. So that became a kind of reoccurring theme, and looking at what technological invention did we do that brought in the middle class, that brought our economies, that brought mobility, that brought all of this stuff to modern life, and without the car, it wouldn't have been there. And we need copper and iron and aluminum and oil for plastics and all of this stuff. So all the inputs to this world that the engine allowed us to create come from mines. And so I wanted to say, okay, there is another side to our life in the city. And this is what it is.
And by this point, we have not yet introduced laptop computers in a broad pop culture way. We've not introduced cell phones yet. And so that only compounds this issue.
Exactly. And even then, when I did research, I looked at mineral maps. I went to mining trade journals to see where big mines were. And I went to a mining conference and talked to them, where are these big mines? So it took, the research at that time was so different than, Google Earth today or all the other ways in which you can access anything you want online. Back then it was Toronto Reference Library, going to conferences, asking people in the business, where are these interesting mines? And that's how I found Kennecott, through somebody in the mining industry. So it was a very different time. I was very much alone, me, my camera, the car, a lone wolf going out there, hanging out in front of these mine sites until I can talk my way into them. I had a portfolio, but I had a helmet and I had steel boots and was kind of prepared to go into it. And I worked as a miner as well, so I kind of knew the language. I told them where I worked, and then that was able to kind of, and I said, I just want to go in and show the world, not necessarily as an indictment what you're doing. We all need metal, we all need oil, we all need copper. We'd be naive to think we don't. I just want to show the scale of it. And so that really disarmed them in many ways. And my images also, I believe, were made in such a way as they sit on this sharp edge. They're neither for nor against. They kind of remain neutral. And as often people have said, this image, for instance, could sit on the wall of a Greenpeace, and it can sit on the board wall as well, the boardroom wall of the corporation. So it can sit in many different places. So it invites you to, I think, contemplate this place. It's to reveal. It's revelatory, not accusatory. It's inviting you to kind of think about what this place is. What does it mean to your life? And the other side of your life. I also looked at tailings. So this is in Sudbury. Looked at, again, the consequences of every mine has a consequence of tailings, because as you dig out all of that material, all of that ground up rock that then has to be disposed of, put somewhere, they're put into tailings ponds. So this is in Sudbury. It's a 6,000 acre tailings pond. At this time, it's like 70 meters deep. If you ever on Trans-Canada Highway going along Sudbury, at one point on the right, you'll see this large, kind of a diagonal, the repose is at about a 45 of gravel, and that is a tailings pond. So that's a tailings pond. Above it, it's 6,000 feet of tailings. They've been pouring tailings in there for over a century. Nickel and copper, it's one of the biggest reserves of nickel and copper in the world. Then I also kind of started looking at other places. Like I went to go and photograph where oil tankers go to die. That's something that, when Exxon Valdez happened, it ran aground off the shore of the western coast and spilled this really goopy, thick crude and destroyed 1,000 kilometers of shoreline at that time with oil. It was all coated. And then they said they're not going to reinsure single-hulled ships anymore. So I wanted to go and photograph, where are they breaking these ships? These are the biggest vessels ever built by humans, and I wanted to follow them. And I ended up on the shores of Chittagong in Bangladesh, which ended up in the film as well, Manufactured Landscapes. I had a videographer with me at the time as well. That was my beginning of working with filmmakers and bringing film into my practice as well. And this is shipbuilding, the reverse, in China. So I went to China. And I followed globalism in many ways, saying globalism is really the march of a Western consumer style, and globalism to me became a shorthand for globalism was a large, cheap, and trainable labor force, low environmental standards so they can pollute, and also a low tax base. So when you have those three things, you have not multinationals setting up shop in these special economic zones. So I started looking where those zones were and following the kind of, all the machinery that was being unbolted from the factory floors here and put on ships and bolted to the floors in China. Now they're being unbolted from the floors in China and moved to different floors in Africa, Ethiopia, Senegal, also all through Vietnam, Bangladesh, Indonesia, anywhere where cheap labor can be found. So it is, again, a thread that I think was really important to kind of begin to tell that story of human enterprise and expansion. Also in water, I did consequences, like large-scale water projects. So this is the remnant of what used to be a brackish delta, the Colorado River, which has not seen or made it to the Gulf of California now for over 40 years. So all the water has been used. 90% of it gets used before it gets to the Mexican border, and the last 10% there's literally a dam right there with levees, and they take so no water. And so this 1,000 square mile brackish living delta, where it would be all the silt from the Grand Canyon. So if you've ever seen the Grand Canyon, all of that void is in that delta, but now that delta is just this plain. And this is really the tides coming in and out, re-etching a tree shape, almost like nature laughing back. It's saying it's still here, and it will bounce back eventually. But it is, again, a testament to human scale and the fact that we've actually taken the contents of a complete river and never let it get to its source for the last 40 years. Also illegal oil harvesting in Niger Delta. I went to Africa and did a whole series there. That's all illegal bunkering sites. So again, Sub-Saharan Africa became the subject for the last decade that I've been going there quite a bit. So I've gone to about 13 countries in Sub-Saharan Africa and just released a book on that. And then full circle, COVID hit, and I was supposed to be in Ethiopia, and I went back to my roots of photographing and did a whole series called Natural Order. And during that first winter of COVID, which was March, April, 2020, I was there up north, sheltering with Julia, and then I just started deciding that I wanted to photograph, and went back and started looking at these complex tapestries of nature, and kind of I'm thinking of it almost as that nature. This is going to be the enduring thing that's left on the planet. If we don't make it as mammals, this will still be here, and in many ways mirrors our nervous systems and our neuronets. It's, to me, the kind of the externalization of all the inner things that give life to us.
Thank you so much, Ed. I think, hearing you talk about your photographic series and your ventures definitely has a very clear arc. But I would also say, I think, with each series, you're becoming deeper and deeper in your thinking about sort of this very human impact on the earth, and more than anything, as you say, sort of like being fairly objective, leaving us with that existential question of what will happen, what will be at the end, like will there be an end of people, and what will that look like on planet Earth? So if I could turn our attention now to Maxim. So Maxim, I'm not sure if you see what we see. So I'll name the photographs because you know which photographs you have sent to us. So right now we have on screen culture.
I can.
Oh, you can see?
Yeah, cultural confrontation.
Oh, very good. Yeah. So if you could speak about your photographs, and then I'll change the images as we go.
Okay. Yeah. And yeah, it's a picture from my books and series Cultural Confrontation. It's Revolution in Kiev. It's really a culture of confrontation because two different cultures start fighting in Kiev. It's one part of culture wanna come back to Soviet Union, and another it's like some government or policeman or some part, and another wanna be like independent and part of European mentality. And before revolution, I was so close. I just only do like documentary photography, but really close to photojournalism. But from revolution, something changed in my mind, and I start focus more for visual language and for emotion. I just not like start looking for some stories like photojournalism. And for me, it was more important visual language and feeling and emotion and. So in this project, it was like I live in Maidan and during revolution, and it was like beginning of few different stories with different language, but unfortunately, it's about one conflict which now it's decade between Ukraine and Russia. And it's for me, it's during revolution. It was like so sad. Situation, but sometimes it's so beautiful, and it's like for me it was like some painting from some museum or painter who make a painting about battles. And when you go to the museum and see two different sides which fighting, you just not choose which side, bad or good side. You just see confrontation. And for me, it was so important try to not like only show Ukrainian revolution, just show that it's like revolution and like some conflict between two different mentality, two different culture, two different people, and we can decide which better or worse. But I try to show my feeling, and after this project I more and more concentrate about feeling, about emotion, about visual language, and not about it's for me was important my objective point of view. I try to understand what I want to show people, and after I just revolution, I covered war in 2014, and after 1 year of covering war, I realized that I just burn out. I have traumatized, I have a lot of problems, psychological or mentally, because when you just, I never want to be to war photographer, and unfortunately it's happened in my country, and I just not even can decide. I don't know what war photographers think when they travel to another country, but it's happened in my hometown when I live. And I shoot to, I just documentary photographer. I am just artist who work with documentary, and during conflict and war, I shoot to decide or escape or just documentary this historical moment. And I decide just do it. But after 1 year, I just decided I should to go to the Chernobyl. It's like, I don't know if it's next year. Oh, it's like between life and death. So yeah, it's like, could be like parallel. I just realized that I should to go to Chernobyl, and parallel I just go to front line where I have been just during 2014. In every place I just remember this bloody place where people fight, and I just know a lot of veterans, and it was also with me when we come back from front. Nobody can understand us, and we have emptiness and a lot of scars from war. And when I come back to this place, which was really important during 2014, I see this building, just checkpoint or on tranchee, and nobody care about this. And I try to show like some parallel what people feel, what veterans feel, that emptiness. I just waiting for this weather. I try to show this white like emptiness and this scarf and this place really important during 2014. And now nobody care about this. Nobody want to just fix it or do something is. And believe me, if you just be near this building or another place, it's like 2 meters right or 2 meters left. It's like normal life. But it's the same feeling what veterans feel when they come back to the crowd, when they come back to the family after war. Even if they come back still alive with arms and legs, they really traumatize mentality, and it's a big problem. And for me, it was also like some therapy, because I just still remember a lot of really bad situation from 2014, and I check the whole line between pro-Russian side and Ukrainian side by car. Few weeks I travel and check a lot of places where I have been have war experience from 2014. And the same period also I realized that I cannot take with people. I need some meditation place, and also start working for Chernobyl project. It's like maybe next picture. And I just go to the Chernobyl, and for me it was, I don't know, like so peaceful place, no people, and it's like some crazy experiment where people do something. It's like similar like Edward do, that people create like nuclear power plant, and after disaster people disappear. And it's nature, it's a lot of animals, birds, and I can just walk in. I just spend a lot of times for some permission, but I can just live sometimes in some place and just walk in. And firstly, it was visual exploration. I want to just, for me, it was like, I just understand that I want to just make more landscape pictures than like some kind of reportage or something close to the people. Even from Maidan, I just do more panorama. I just all the time go back and try to make like some wide picture where I can just show 100 people who fight and from another 100 people. And it's like even hard to understand which side is good or bad. And here it was like some kind of meditation. I spent a lot of months. It's like I just beginning to do it from 2016. But after a few months, I started just going inside of building and found a lot of archives, negatives, pictures, old pictures, letters, because people just was evacuated for temporary, for 3 days, and never ever come back. And children and grandchildren never saw like looks their grandpa or grandma or house. And I start collecting. And my picture even start like, not like so important, because I start collecting this archive and start working with memory and with time. So, and for me it was like also some kind of portal to the past. Now I have huge collection, like 500 negatives and maybe 20,000 of old picture and letters. It's like some museum. I check 22 villages with geo tags. I have ID for every house, for every family, and try to collect for future for some like museum or archive, and maybe in future even some grandchild can see lost picture and found how looks and their family. And for me it was like some kind of, like I say, like meditation therapy, and it's really neat to me. And I thought that previous project Between Life and Death was my last project about war. I thought it's like I come back to Neo Frontline, I take this, I just like fix my problem inside of me and never come back to the front line. And I just lived 2 years before war in Asia with my wife and working for Chernobyl project, and had some grant, and come back to Ukraine and live 3 months in Chernobyl and collect a lot of new archives. And after, war is beginning, and I just say, okay, what I can do? I should again go to the war, and just it's again to work with some magazine, because for me, like working with magazine, I'm just not like thinking I'm photojournalist, but I work with documentary photography, and I just connected with big magazine like New Yorker or Time magazine or Spiegel or Geo, and I can make like fighting against of Russian propaganda, and I can just do parallel like work like a journalist and fighting against of propaganda of Russian, and also just documentary in this historical moment and do picture about how looks it.
Right, and
what I feel.
so then in
Yeah.
in late February of 2022, of course, this full scale invasion began, and so now we're looking at Invasion 2022, which is an ongoing series.
Yeah. Yeah, now I'm just working for this series, yeah, and Edward really helped me with his support, and I have now Grant Eugene Smith. It's like I can continue do it, yeah, and I just use next picture you can see. I can use sometimes in front line like drones picture, and just so I do a lot of picture with tragedy, with wounded people, with soldier in front line, like working with New Yorker for some stories where we live 2 weeks in front line, in zero line, 150 meters near Russian. And for me, it's like some kind of support of Ukraine. But for my personal project or exhibition or something else, I more concentrate for feeling, for aftermaths, for landscape picture. For me, it's more sensitive, more important than bloody picture, than soldier picture. It's like sometimes I understand it could be even like Ukrainian propaganda, but I want to do something more important and more. And so I just like continue working, documenting this historical moment. But after 10 years of documenting this war, it's like my visual language change and closer to landscape. I don't know, for me it's harder and harder take picture with soldier, take picture with people. I all the time just try to, like Edward do, like about what people do with our planet, amount resource or something else, but we also destroy our planet during war, during conflict, during nuclear disaster, during everything. And I just after Asia, after change of my philosophy, are really close to East philosophy, and I realized that human is part of nature, part of our planet, and I try to concentrate more and more for how impact and what happened not only with human, what happens with animals, what happened with land. It was like beautiful land about Chernobyl, and after Soviet Union built this nuclear power plant after disaster, and now it's incredible place. You can see how could see our planet after our species. It still continue.
Right.
It's still a lot of animals, birds, everything. You can still see some houses or something else, but without any human. And when I walk in 3 months with my wife, it empty this place only with nature, animal and birds, but still can see some houses and can go inside and see, oh, this house of school teacher or fisherman or something else, because you can see some stuff. It's unique experience, and I think it's everything, war, traumatized, this experience, Asia, it's changing. I think just it's change also my visual language. But if be honest, I dream about day when I just cannot take any war picture.
Yeah, well, so I mean, so it's interesting, and of course, I mean, our condolences to you for what you and of course all of Ukraine are living through. You know, we were chatting earlier about sort of the effects of combat zone photographers. So definitely hope that you are taking care of yourself as much as possible, while of course, you know, doing an invaluable service for those of us who are afar, so that we can see what is going on. But I mean, ultimately, you and Ed have found yourselves at this period of really looking at the landscape. and for very different reasons, but for some of the same reasons. So now I think we all sort of have an appreciation for how these two photographers' arcs have come to meet, and how this synagogue, provided this opportunity, this particular project. So here, of course, the exterior of the synagogue, and the synagogue opened. So those of you who come to the Koffler will certainly become much more acquainted with these images. So at this stage, I hope to turn back to Robert Jan and ask, sort of as the curator of this exhibition, along with Manuel, along with Douglas Birkinshaw, how do these photographs sort of function in your mind as a part of this exhibition?
Now, the exhibition is really an exhibition about the building of the synagogue. It is about the conception of the synagogue, and the construction of it. And it really, in some way, what we try to do is put you into the architect's office and see the models, the various concepts that were considered. And so it is one about construction. But the fact is that all architecture is, of course, site-bound. That makes it so interesting. In architecture schools, first-year students will hear the term genius loci, the spirit of the place. And it was very important for us that the spirit of the place would be there. Now, the idea was that there are two spirits at work right now. There is a spirit of the past, that is the spirit of the landscape, as it, in some way, 80 years after the catastrophe, the horror of September 1941, nature has taken over again, and it's again, but not only nature, it's also people who've taken over. It's in the middle, actually, the ravine of a very dense neighborhood.
And so I actually have a question about that, because when we look at the photographs mentioned earlier by Johannes Helle, it doesn't look like Babyn Yar had trees, at least based on the photographs that we have access to. So are these trees all new since World War II?
Yeah. And they actually are all since the collapse. So in 1961, there was a major collapse. So basically the whole site was destroyed by this rush of mud that went down. And after that, it was a mud plain. And I guess if Ed, you had been there, you would have had a great opportunity to make some remarkable pictures about the human destructiveness. But of course, the Soviet regime really suppressed much documentation of the site. But so these trees are trees that basically are that have grown there since the 1960s, and of course the verticality of the trees. I mean, the trees they really there's a sense that they are coming from a cursed soil. And so this is around the synagogue, but the synagogue itself, it's just away from these trees, just outside of the thing. And I think Ed will be, or Maxime will probably be able to talk more about the way that they interpreted the trees in their photos. The other thing, of course, is that we wanted people to have a sense of what it means to be in that synagogue. And so on the one side, there was we were interested in having this panoramic sense of landscape as far as it's possible within a forest. And on the other side, we wanted the experience of being in this fantastically beautiful space. And I have to mention that there is only one great tradition in the history of Jewish art, Jewish architectural art, which is wholly unique to Judaism. That means that when we talk about synagogues here in Toronto, synagogues in Europe, in Hungary, in the Netherlands, in Germany, since basically the exile from Palestine, Israel in Roman times, all of these buildings were always mostly created by non-Jews, and they're very closely tied to non-Jewish architectural traditions. The great exception to that story are the wooden synagogues that were constructed in the so-called Pale of Settlement, that is today Ukraine, Belarus, and Eastern Poland, in the 17th, 18th, and early 19th century. This is a tradition in which also Jewish craftsmen worked, the Jewish painters, even Jewish carpenters, in these shtetls. And there's no parallel in, for example, the Christian architectural tradition of that time. So it's uniquely Jewish in its conception, also in its production. That whole tradition was wiped out in three major phases. First, at the end of the 19th century, when basically industrialization takes over, and many of these shtetls die because people move to larger cities where there are factories, and then you get also larger stone synagogues in these larger towns. The second big erasure of this tradition happened in the Russian Civil War, after the Bolsheviks came to power and the whites and the reds were fighting in this area. So 1919, 1920, 1921, when probably 40% of these synagogues were destroyed, and the third one, of course, during the Holocaust. And none of these synagogues survive. So what we tried to do is resurrect using the iconography of one particular one, and to give you a sense of what it is to be in that space. And so that was in some way the double commission, give a sense of the landscape of that past, but also give a sense of, in some way, the present of being in that synagogue once it's opened.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Robert Jan. And so Ed and Maxim, maybe in turn, I wonder if you could both sort of address what was your approach, and I'll flip back to what was your approach, and like how did you collaborate? Were you, you were, as we've titled this program, a world away. So how did that work? Ed, if I could ask you to speak.
So I was able to see some images, and I saw the video of the synagogue in the book, which was brilliant, by the way. It was like something that was, I would love to see it in person. And I looked at the landscape around it, and it was a familiar kind of territory that I had to traverse when I was doing the work on the Holocaust, and going back 70 years, which, some of the images are now on display in Ottawa at the memorial. So it was an approach of looking at the landscape, and that these feel like bucolic, beautiful landscapes, but there's a deeper story, a tragedy that sits and a crime. It's the scene of a crime that sits right behind this landscape. But 70 years, 75 years later, it takes on as kind of disarming, image of nature, and there was a foreboding. So we started to work. It was February, March, so we were worried about the snow, but there was a great melt that started to happen, and to get that kind of quality, the presence of the trees. Again, Maxim spoke about it, but I had perfected with Jim Panu, who's kind of works with me as a colleague, and we worked together on these shoots. And by doing overlapping of the image, and we're using a 100 megapixel camera, so it's a very high resolution camera, and we're overlapping the frames as we build out the shots, and then Maxim would download these high res shots. But to get there, what happened is I said, go with your iPhone and just here are the images that I've taken, and a lot of them were from the Natural Order series that I just done, and I said, this is kind of stylistically where I'm sitting, what I've been doing as well. And if you go around with your iPhone, and because iPhone had a way which you can geo pin it to exactly where he was standing, and so he just went for several walks and just took images, trying to kind of, I guess, get close to where my work and my thoughts and the way I frame things were. So we were kind of trying to find something that met somewhere in the middle. And then I looked at all the images, and he probably sent 100 images on his iPhone, and then we reduced it down to like maybe 8-10 locations. And then we started to work with him on those locations and to build out the shots, and then he would send us the shots, and then Jim would stitch them together. We would do tests, and so he sort of went back and forth in this kind of using the images as a way to kind of build on the themes that we established.
Great, thank you. And so Maxim, again, a world away. What was that experience like for you? Had you ever done anything like this before, and what was that experience like?
Yeah, for me it was an amazing experience because I very well known with Edward work, and it was experience collaboration with Edward and with his team, and who really support, because how he explained, I just make a lot of iPhone picture with a lot of talking, and I just deeply understand how work Edward, and it's backstage of his work. It's unbelievable experience, and it's like I start feeling more and more landscape, and Edward talked with me a lot of, and Jim a lot of helped me with technical situation. I have some small experience about panorama, maybe like 5 or 10 years ago, but now I just should to just more concentrate not only about technical, but also about it's quite hard technically, and I don't know, without Jim it will be like really hard, but about feeling, about how I should do connection and with nature, with this place, because you walk on, you just, when we scouted it, you understand that a lot of people, a lot of Jews and Rome was killed here, and it's like so sad place, but at the same time it's so beautiful. And for me it was like really great experience, to be honest. And I hope you feel when you can see this picture in museum, you can feel this place and feel this what we try to do with Edward, and try to present this place which near this synagogue and near this sad place.
Yeah, I think there is this beauty of desolation in a way, and I think there was like a certain serendipity that these images were taken in the dead of winter, without sort of like the greenery and the leaves, which we have. There are some beautiful photographs by Ivan Bon taken in Babyn Yar during better weather. So these really make such a great contrast. I guess I'll ask sort of both Ed and Maxim, with hindsight, is there anything that you would have done differently?
In my books, no. I think we worked towards the kind of light, so the light was perfect. At one point, I thought, at first I thought, does the snow going to work? And at one point, it was all coated with snow. When like just before Maxim got there, it was a complete coating, so there was no leaves or earth showing through. And for me, it lacked something. That would have. And also, I thought about it, if all the snow would be gone, then it would also just have this darkness to it. So this kind of 50-50 situation with the earth and the leaves and the snow, I felt was really kind of perfect. And the leaves off the trees, it wouldn't be the same if it was the summertime. So we wanted this melancholy, we wanted this sadness to kind of come through. So the light is a very somber light too. It's like a heavy overcast day, which I particularly like to work in. And so we found the right kind of conditions, and of course in February it's not hard to find that condition. So in a way, I think sometimes serendipity and luck is part of the process. And so the fact the week that he was there, and I know Maxim had to leave to go to the front line, I think right after that. So that was the week we had, and it ended up being this like perfect moment to capture it, and the light was great. The conditions of the ground were great, and there is this kind of, the sense of out of this death is a rebirth, and going back to that first picture of the grasses coming through the last year's deadfall. It was again another way to use landscape, but to invest it with a kind of a potency and the power of metaphor.
And Maxim, could you tell us, like, what was it like to physically be there in wintertime taking these pictures?
Yeah, and if we're honest, I should to say is that next day after we just finished taking all panorama, all snow was melted and there was blue sky. So it's like Edward said, we was so lucky because it was like some
Really
like
perfect
some
timing.
or God or something else just help us, because after one day it's not possible. And huh? Yeah, and I try to feel this place. I try to connection with nature, and that would really help me with a lot of advice. Because when I come back from front line, you should understand it's like really hard to connection for a place where you just sometimes like cannot understand what here. And I try to feel it, and I try to explain, and we just work with this hill, with this. For me, it's like metaphor. You can see every tree. It's like some souls. It's like some human who was death here, who was killed here, and it's like this place. Yeah. Sure.
And so, Ed.
And about winter, I just really love winter time. I just mostly work even with the frontline picture or Chernobyl, like you see. For me, it's like snow and winter time. It's like I like this, and I just work with this a lot. I just even don't remember when I just last time take picture with life with green. Or with blue skies. It's like my way of working, and I just we talked with Edward before about snow and without snow, and I'm really happy that it happens like something between, like with snow but a little bit melty, and it's something I don't know, connection me with nature during this time.
Great, thank you so much. So I wonder, Ed, I mean, you have been to the space, so you popped in a couple of weeks after the exhibition opened, and so I wonder, because you were in the space, walked around, saw these images up on the wall, how do you feel about this final product? Like that they're in there and they provide this environment?
Yeah, I mean, it is a kind. I mean, obviously, it's in with an exhibition, and there's all kinds of didactics and other things that are happening in the exhibition. But for me, it was really great to see the fact that when your eyes kind of move off as you move through the space, you are experiencing a lot of what you would be if you were walking around on that February day. Because there's a the attention to the printing and the lighting of it was something that we all know it's a photograph, but it's almost life scale, and it's immersive, and you can walk up to the trees and you can look at them, and they're some of them are a bit gnarled, and they have character, they have their own kind of personalities in there as well. So there is something I thought that was we try to find those panoramics that were rich in tonal scale, and they almost, in a funny way, they feel black and white, and you have to go in and actually look at the color of the soil or just a little bit of color in the trees because the leaves aren't there. So they're literally black and white, but they're full color, and there's only traces of color, which I love that kind of nuance. Again, bringing this kind of both an envelope of nature, a story that it's telling, that there's a story behind these places, a tragic story, and I think more than ever this has to be remembered, because we are entering a very scary time again, and what's happening in Ukraine and what's just happened as well in Israel, that and authoritarianism. So we're at this particular moment where we need to remind ourselves of these stories.
So I suppose my last question really has to do with this exhibition, which Matthew Jocelyn, our director of Koffler Arts, mentioned. This exhibition will be touring fairly extensively. So from a curator's perspective and from a photographer's perspective, especially in terms of the printing and installation of these large vinyl prints, how will that happen in different venues? So maybe we'll start with Robert Jan.
I don't know. It's very clear that the success of the photography in some way has become the success of the exhibition. Now, I just want to say that we do have, of course, two amazing other pieces, and I'm not talking right now about the even bound photographs, we just saw them before on the wall to the right, and maybe there's somewhat didactic reconstruction of the architect's way of working, but the model here. So this model actually comes from a bunker. This was made simultaneously with the synagogue. It's 1 to 10. It's a working model. It's fully mechanical. It opens and closes and so on. It was made by Ukrainian craftsmen. It's an absolutely gorgeous model, and it was made to be displayed in the presidential palace. And of course, the model wasn't yet finished when the war broke out. And so we were able to basically get a loan of this model, which will travel the world. And it is, in some way, it is part of the real thing. It was made basically in Kyiv by the same people who made the synagogue. Incredible craftsmanship. And the other thing is a little room. And the room is more or less where Ed and I are sitting here, and it is a place in which you can lean back, and where you can actually, there's a projection on the ceiling. And one of the remarkable pieces of the synagogue is that when the ceiling unfolds, it is actually the sky of the night of the massacre. But it is reinterpreted in the folk art of the Jewish synagogues of the 18th century. So the stars have become flowers and so on. And so this, of course, goes back to the whole issue of where was God? And there is a very famous eyewitness testimony from one of the massacres, and it is actually a German engineer who was working near the place where the massacre started, and he testified in 1945. He sees all these people being led, and he starts talking to the Jews who are being led to the place of their death. And there's this one girl, and one girl says, I'm 18. And of course, she's going to die at the age of 18. And he records that, and then he sees a father and a son. And the father and the son, they're now undressed, and they're sitting at the edge of the place where they will be shot. And the son is crying, and the father holds the son, and then he points up to the sky. And of course, we don't know what the father will say, but there is obviously a reference to some greater reality than that of our earth. And so the question of where was God and so on, and we try to also raise that in recreating the sky of that night. And so that is also a part of the experience. So I think right now that the key pieces of the exhibition are those three major reconstructions of the landscape, synagogue, the model, and this room of reflection. And whatever happens, they will be there. And if the architectural part of the exhibition get edited, so be it.
And so Ed, I understand you're involved in, of course, the printing. So what will that look like when there are future venues? How will these large-scale photographic murals translate?
Well, I mean, there's a very unique and bespoke space that we're here, and the nice thing about the way Maxim shot it in collaboration with it, that we can kind of make them a little bit shorter. We can't make them longer. We can kind of compress them a bit, or reformat them if they need a specific condition. If it's an open space, it would probably be, if we had more space, I think it could be interesting to not have as much in the room itself, so you can have some move into another room so that the images can kind of be more enveloping without obstruction. So if the new venue had like 2 rooms, it might be a way to put some stuff in it, but not as much that blocks your views to the actual space itself. So, but I think each one, and I suspect like I do now, we'll get the spec. We'll work with a curator there or whoever's doing the installation. We'll get the dimensions. We would print them here, roll them up, and with special instructions to have somebody install them in wherever the new location is. So we would still manage the quality of the image and all of that, and the formatting of the images, and shipping them to these new venues.
Great, that's really wonderful. So at this stage, like all good conversations, we've gone a little bit over. But we do have microphones on each side, and I'm wondering if there might be a couple of questions, a few questions from the audience. Any brave souls, please step on over. And then if you're asking a question, please specify for whom or if it's for everyone involved. Back to the pictures of the synagogue. Like here? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this photo was one of the photos taken by Ivan Bon, as well as the exterior photo in its closed form, we'll say.
Yeah, maybe you can show the open one again. Mm-hmm. I must say that for me, I was present at the 80th anniversary, which was actually held at the beginning of October 2021 in Kyiv, and it was an incredibly moving day, and it started out that the synagogue was opened. And I had met the chief rabbi the day before, and the chief rabbi of Ukraine, there are actually two dueling chief rabbis. I mean, typical for Jewish communities, not much unity there. But the one of them had told me about this incredible, his sense of that. He said this synagogue in a few months has done more for non-Jewish Jewish relations in Ukraine than his work on the ground for 25 years. And this is because of the openness. And then I spent the whole day on the site, and I was here at the synagogue when he came with literally the who is who of religious Ukraine. So there was the Roman Catholic Archbishop with a lot of priests. Then there was the Ukrainian Orthodox Church Metropolitan or Patriarch, so the head of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, with a lot of priests. And they started to be in this place, and the chief rabbi, or one of the two chief rabbis, started to explain everything. And they were like kids. They were like kids in a sandbox. I'd never seen that, I mean, normally when you see all these guys in these black robes and whatever like that, they're pretty frightening lot to engage at even a good day. And they were, and there was so much joy. There was so much joy in this space that I really thought, that's what it needs to do. That is what it can do. And then later, there was a concert given by a Berlin Symphony Orchestra, of course, the Babyn Yar Symphony by Shostakovich, which was incredibly powerful. And then the cantor who was going to recite the prayer for the dead, he stepped up to the corner, and we were all around there. He stepped up to the corner, and he said, "I would like to introduce myself. I am 80 years old, and I was born 80 years ago in Jaffa, and I was born at the eve of Yom Kippur, and I was always very proud that I was born on the eve of Yom Kippur. And then when I grew up, when I became 13, during my bar mitzvah, I was told that Yom Kippur, the day that I was born, that was the end of the massacre at Babyn Yar." And so there was a man who literally was born at the eve that ended at the end of the massacre, who was saying the prayer for the dead. And it was, I mean, people were crying all around. I was crying, and I must say this is one of the most intensely emotional days in my life. In the beginning, to see these former people who have been taught to hate each other to have joy together in the synagogue. And then at the end, the arrival, the voice of the man who basically capped this beautiful day, who had been born on that very day. So there was a lot of magic that day.
Very, very moving indeed. I think we may have a question from the audience. Yes.
I have a question for Ed. I've followed your landscape work for a very long time, and I'm just wondering, the whole subject of the Holocaust seems so out of keeping with everything else you've done. So how does this fit in with your other work?
Well, I've actually worked a lot in architectural photography. There's a whole stream that I've also done throughout my career. And when this opportunity came around to work with the Lord services who had gotten, and we put in a bid with 70 other teams, international teams, to do this 2.2 acre site. And so it was also a chance to collaborate, with Daniel Libeskind and Claude Cormier, who just recently passed away, and other great talents. And I'm always I collaborate with filmmakers. I collaborate with, symphonies, some orchestras, and music at times. And so I am always interested, going beyond my comfort zone. And I have to say, the working on the. Did I just lose this? I think so. Working on the preparation to do and trying to understand how, because I think where it connects is that I try to convert ideas of visually through photographs of through the landscape. And that was basically my core subject that I had to deal with, was the landscape of where these events had occurred. And it was trying to find, the way into that space that could move us, and but you'd still, as a viewer, unlike other, like a mine or wherever, that or a quarry, that's self-descriptive. Here, you need to know what happened there in conjunction with what you're looking at, and together that builds the meaning of that image and builds the depth and the feeling within that image. Like Maxim was talking about, he was trying to have someone feel something in the presence of that space. So I think in many ways, and of all the travel I've done, I've never been back to Ukraine. I've been trying to get back there. There's issues that as I explained earlier. I think in that regard, this pushed me out of my comfort zone, and it was something that I must say, the year and a half preparing and researching and reading and looking at video and becoming kind of familiarized with the kind of inhumanity and the mechanizations of death. It was, took me a while to kind of still recover. It's a painful thing to understand and to really deeply understand what happened. And that was a chance for me to also confront. My father was part of that. He was a Ukrainian. The Germans came and took him. They took my mother, had them as slaves, in German farms and working during the war efforts. So all these stories and these pictures of around that time were also part of my growing up as well. So it was a chance to kind of, for me to become far more connected and deeply kind of immersed in the tragedy of the Second World War.
Great, thank you so much. I think we may have one more question over here.
I was wondering how long it took for the synagogue to be built and what the procedure was. Was it built on site, or was it moved there from another location?
Yeah, maybe it's not an appropriate joke, but if Mr. Putin knew what we had seen, the amazing ability of Ukrainian civil society to get together and literally create a miracle out of nothing in no time. So we decided, so as the board, the architectural board, we proposed to the board, the big board of the Babyn Yar Foundation at the beginning of October, like the 7th of October, to build a synagogue. We got permission within a day. Yeah? So basically money was made available. And we had no budget. I mean, it was kind of an unlimited budget. We invited Manuel Hertz 3 days later, so that was he had his first concept in by the 20th of October. We approved it by the 23rd of October. And then basically he went into design development for a month. So by the end of November, there was a basic set of drawings concept. Then it went back to Ukraine. And now the big problem was, of course, to get building permission. Yeah, and of course there's a lot of talk still about corruption in Ukraine. In this case, it really worked to our advantage. We had the building permit within a week. Yeah, on this incredibly charged site. And so construction starts. So the next thing is to get materials. All of the lumber that was used is actually recycled lumber of trees that were cut before the Holocaust. So now the whole question was, where are we going to find the lumber? So all over Ukraine, basically, barns that were collapsing, and we know that in Ontario, our collapsing barns are a great source of lumber, of old lumber, were basically harvested. And so by the beginning of January, the building materials were there. And construction started in many different places of the pieces. There's a lot of engineering in it because it opens and closes. Yeah, so it's an enormously complex machine, actually. So that had to be made, and we opened. It was standing and could be opened on the 10th of April, and Yom Shoah, the 16th of April. It was ready for its first service, attended by the both chief rabbis of Israel. So this was basically constructed in 3 months. But it's constructed for all time. Now, there is one piece that is very important for Manuel in the whole thing, because if he were to be sitting here, he would like you to know that there is always this idea that memorials are typically built in stone and steel and concrete. The idea is that they need to last. And almost every memorial is like that. And go to Berlin, the great Eisenman memorial. This memorial is made of very fragile materials. And the idea is that memory needs to be attended to every day. That this is a memorial which will disappear if people don't take care of it. So it puts again a burden on us as those who are the stewards of that memory and of that past to be attentive. And that is, in that sense, this memorial, a very kind of fragile wooden synagogue, is maybe a kind of paradigm of a new way of understanding memorials in this very confusing time.
Many, many thanks. Many thanks, of course, to our 3 panelists, Dr. Robert Jan van Pelt, Edward Bertinsky, Maxim Dondiuk on camera. Thank you so much to you, the audience, and of course, our thanks to Josh, Jacqueline, Aaron, and everyone here at the ROM.